Yeah, housing has been the number one issue that we've been tackling as a government. We made historic investments to address the crisis because it does impact the social determinants right across the territory of Nunavut. So we're pushing hard to actually see the infrastructure built right across our community. So we look forward to seeing that over the next few months, especially this construction season. Actually, it's the number one issue for us. Housing has been a core issue for many decades in the north. The premier has been the number one priority since we've taken office. We've made record number of investments to address the housing crisis that we've seen, and we look forward to working to continue to work with Ottawa to address the housing crisis that's been there for many decades.
When you talk to your people in your office, what is the story that's showing just how severe the crisis is? What do you expect?
Just the sheer impact it has. It has impacts on the social determinants, as I've mentioned. It really limits the advancements that we see, so we've really made investments into housing, and I'm really proud of where we're going with there, but we need Ottawa to partner with us, and then the discussions in the next few days, I look forward to relaying that as we move forward.
Missing and murdered Indigenous women. We're here in Manitoba right now. There's many that are calling for a search of the landfill where 2 First Nations women, their remains are believed to be found. What do you want? What are you calling on premiers to do in that particular case?
Well, I think reconciliation is at the top of our priorities. The relationship we have with the rights holders, with Indigenous organizations in Nunavut specifically, we have a very strong relationship with Nunavut Incorporated, as well as Inuit Kanatame. And for us to continue to really build upon the relationship that's so crucial to us, and as a territory that has majority Indigenous people, Inuit specifically in Nunavut, that relationship is so crucial, and we'll continue to build on that.
Should the federal government search that landfill?
That's a discussion that has to happen. My thoughts and my heart obviously goes to the families. We know the impact colonial history we've seen in Canada has had a huge impact in terms of the relationship between Indigenous. As an Inuk myself, it's really important to really prioritize that important relationship. That's really important to us. So thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Well, we've been asking for a pause. We don't know if that's, now that it's implemented, we don't know how that is going to be interpreted. I hear the environment minister talking about the situation in Winnipeg, the same doesn't need to happen, but obviously the company and the budget is interpreted.
Absolutely. It's the focus of Manitoba right
This is
now.
what we've done all along.
Have to have the free
What do you want to get the support of the other provincial premiers in terms of advancing the discussion on the landfill search?
It's a Canadian issue. Our women, it's unfortunate, and it's unfortunate we even have to have these discussions. And I think that, our women deserve more. We don't belong. We're not garbage.
Have you had discussions with any of the other territorial provincial premiers?
We will today.
What exactly can this group do? Because it is actually the federal government, of course, that the conversation about paying for a potential search. So what are you hoping for from the premiers?
Well, I think the premier, Manitoba and the federal government are both responsible. I think all levels of government need to come together for intergovernmental relations on this issue, and we have to talk to each other, and not talking is not helping. Thank you.
What are your other issues for the meeting generally, like beyond the landfill search? Are there some other priorities you can identify us for the table?
Yep. So First Nations have a lot of issues. Intergovernmental cooperation. We need a bigger seat at this table. I know that they're meeting tomorrow and Wednesday, and First Nations need to be at those tables. We're a big population in this country. People like to talk about First Nations people, but not have us at the table. And I think that relationship needs to change. And I think that if we work together in a stronger and a better way, it'll be better for this entire country. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Caron, I know you had some concerns about who exactly is at this table today. Can you share those concerns with us?
Yeah, sure. So this meeting is not being held in a way that respects our conditions for participation in intergovernmental fora. What we want is to see this meeting go forward in a way that respects the Section 35 constitutionally recognized Indigenous people in our Constitution, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Right now, there are 3 national Indigenous organizations who are mandated by rights-bearing Indigenous people to do that work at the national level, and that's the Métis National Council, the AFN, and the ITK. To have a meeting here with certain subnational entities to have these conversations doesn't advance the conversations that we need to advance with the premiers in a rights-based advocacy manner.
What does it take away from it to have a couple other people at the table, just for people who aren't familiar with it? What's the problem?
First of all, the meeting isn't long enough to engage meaningfully in these conversations. For example, we're not actually even invited to the Council of the Federation meeting. This is a meeting of premiers and Indigenous leaders prior to the formal meeting of the Council of the Federation. I have 15 minutes on the agenda today to present issues and priorities affecting the Métis Nation. I represent a nation. 15 minutes just simply is not enough time to engage with these governments on a government-to-government, nation-to-nation basis to influence the change that's needed to progress down a path of reconciliation and actually create systemic and influential change that our communities need to see.
So what tangible results were you hoping for then from coming here?
Today I'm going to speak with the premiers and present our conditions for future participation in these intergovernmental fora. I hope that through these conversations we can illuminate the need to move forward in a much better and more respectful way. I hope that we can continue on this engagement throughout the next year and that we're able to make progress throughout the year so that when we come back next year, we're invited to the Council of the Federation meeting and actually able to participate in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Premier Eby. Thank you so much for waiting.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, nothing's too good for the media.
What are your priorities heading into this week's meetings in Winnipeg?
Well,
you talk to the camera, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk over this way. Really glad to be here with my colleagues from across Canada. We share so many key priorities, issues of healthcare, public safety, housing, economic development, and cost of living are priorities across Canada. So there's lots of good ideas, suggestions, innovation that we can share with each other, as well as a common front when we talk to the federal government about these issues. So these meetings are really important.
There have been deals made on when it comes to healthcare, but now it's about getting into the technical details. Now that money is going to be given, what are you going to do as a province to address the healthcare crisis, the shortage of doctors, the wait times in your province?
Well, one of the big challenges that we're seeing across Canada, and certainly BC is no exception, is an aging population, increased demand on our healthcare system, and needing to have the staff to meet that demand. In terms of the nurses, the family doctors, the health science professionals, the people who really make the hospitals go. So I know, like many provinces and territories, we're looking to internationally trained doctors and nurses to help fill some of that gap, including from the United States. But we're also having to invest for the long term in education and training for healthcare professionals. New spaces for nurses, 600 new spaces in our province, new spaces for doctors as well, a new medical school in British Columbia to build for the long term. In terms of the discussion here, aligning our efforts so we're not competing with each other for these health professionals, we're not driving up costs without improving results for Canadians. A kind of coordination of a national healthcare system is really an opportunity that's presented here.
The housing crisis in your province, can you describe how extreme it is and how big of an issue that's going to be for you at the table here and what you want to see from you?
Sure. Well, we're seeing quite dramatic population growth in British Columbia. We added about 250,000 people to our province in just the last 2 years. We need housing for those folks. And it's at the same time that we're challenged around people with the skills to build the housing that we need, the labor. The cost of materials are going up. Interest rates are going up, which are making it harder to build purpose-built rental housing. When you put all of this together, it's a very significant challenge for our province, but it's an issue that we're seeing across Canada as well. It's showing up in our province in terms of increased homelessness, despite significant investments at the provincial level to build social housing to get people off the street. People who earn a decent income are finding themselves priced out of the market. So we're doing some innovative things in our province. We've got more to do. We've got some important legislative initiatives in the fall. But in terms of a meeting like this, our opportunity to share best practices as well as work with the federal government to respond to this. We had Deputy Prime Minister Freeland in town recently for Roundtable on Housing to discuss some of those opportunities to coordinate better at the national level. Could make a really big difference for British Columbians looking for a home.
Cassidy Caron just told us that she thinks they should be included in the full council of the Federation meeting, not just given 15 minutes on the day before to quickly go through their issues. What do you think about that? Should leaders from the national Indigenous organizations be at the main table with you guys instead of, given a little side table the day before?
Well, for British Columbia, it's an important priority for us as a province to have Indigenous governments as full partners in provincial development. That includes laws that affect Indigenous people in our province, resource development and economic development on the land. We're doing work on that at the provincial level, and those governments are full partners with us at the table. That's why I'm here, is to hear directly from Indigenous leadership nationally, who are also our close working partners at home.
But shouldn't they be?
How concerned are you right now about the port work stoppage in the province?
Well, like all Canadians, British Columbians are critically aware of the impact that a closed port or disruptions at the port can have on essential supplies, on the cost of living. The workers at the port, who are many of whom, in this case, who are British Columbians, have also seen their costs go up. So they need to be treated fairly. And our hope is that all parties, the employer, the workers, work hard at the table to get a deal, because our ports are critically important infrastructure for all Canadians, not just for British Columbians. And we have a critical role as the gateway to the Pacific. And I know it's front of mind for everybody, but it's absolutely critical we get a deal as soon as possible.
Is it federal money that solves that, or what solves that?
I think that it's up to the parties to be creative at the table to come up with a deal. I think the federal government has an important role to play in facilitating those discussions and make sure that there's a lasting and long-term deal at the table. And I hope that they're actively involved, because it is such a critically important piece of infrastructure for all Canadians. And it shows up in the cost of daily life for Canadians that are facing pressure right now.
What's going to be the big outcome from this meeting?
We come into these meetings, there's a number of pressing issues. So right now in British Columbia, for example, we have wildfires across the province. We've had 3 or 4 years of really significant drought. We're seeing climate impacts here. So for me, being around the table, really underlying how important climate action is for Canadians and climate resilience is a key outcome that I want to have come from this table, is to really reinforce that BC perspective at this table, and also to find ways to work together on those other issues that we face that are so challenging, that are showing up in every province. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Vous avez parlé avec Bombardier du remplacement de la flotte d'avions Aurora CP-140. Quelles sont vos inquiétudes au juste?
Bon, d'abord, vous dire que je suis content d'être ici au Conseil de la Fédération. On va parler beaucoup de sujets. Aujourd'hui, on parle des relations avec les peuples autochtones, on va parler de santé. Moi, le sujet sur lequel je vais insister, c'est beaucoup l'économie. Bon, d'abord, l'économie verte. C'est important qu'on s'entende bien que le gouvernement fédéral, pour des incitatifs pour attirer des entreprises dans le secteur de la batterie, aluminium vert, acier vert, autobus électriques, donc tous les domaines autour de l'économie verte. Il y a un dossier aussi que je veux amener avec Doug Ford. Donc on a demandé, Doug Ford et moi, de le mettre à l'agenda du Conseil de la Fédération. C'est le dossier du remplacement des avions de chasse pour les sous-marins. Il semble que le gouvernement fédéral pense à donner le contrat à Boeing là, sans faire d'appel d'offres, alors que Bombardier peut offrir, avec le Global 6500 ajusté, en quelques années seulement, pour être capable d'offrir un avion qui serait au moins aussi bon que celui de Boeing. Et quand on regarde la planification qui avait été faite par le gouvernement fédéral jusqu'à maintenant, il y avait quelques années de disponibles. Donc on ne voit pas pourquoi, étant donné des milliers d'emplois, les retombées, là, on parle d'un contrat de plus de 5 milliards, pourquoi le gouvernement fédéral ne ferait pas un appel d'offres, ne laisserait pas Bombardier soumissionner sur le contrat?
Et si vos autres homologues...
Can you repeat in English just before we move to the next topic about what you're calling on the federal government to do, including with Premier Ford when it comes to Bombardier?
Okay, so I've asked with Doug Ford that we put on the agenda about this contract that will be given by the federal government. We would like that Bombardier had an opportunity to table a proposal instead of going directly with Boeing. And we think that it will take only a few years, so it's within the planning period of the federal government, and it means thousands of jobs in Canada, and we're talking about a contract of more than $5 billion. So it's an important contract, and we don't understand. Of course, we can understand that the U.S. government must put a lot of pressure on the Canadian government, but we have a Canadian company, Bombardier, having plants in Ontario, in Quebec, that can supply what is needed. So we're asking the federal government, and we would like to have the support of all premiers, asking that to Mr. Trudeau.
Mais quel pouvoir vous avez vraiment, justement, face au gouvernement fédéral si vos autres homologues des provinces ne vous soutiennent pas?
Bien, d'abord, déjà, le Québec et l'Ontario, c'est deux provinces importantes. Il y a des retombées aussi prévues dans les maritimes, dans les provinces de l'Ouest. Je pense que c'est un principe qui devrait être utilisé continuellement par le gouvernement fédéral. Si c'est possible d'avoir des retombées économiques au Canada, on devrait le faire. Là, on sait comment les Américains sont protectionnistes, donc il ne faut pas être naïf.
Merci beaucoup.
Could you just repeat your other priorities when it comes to healthcare? You're one of the provinces that is not wrapped up your deal with the federal government.
Yeah, of
so
course.
What's happening there, and what you're going to be talking about?
Okay, I think that of course we would have liked to see the federal government putting more money in the healthcare transfers. But of course, right now they decided to invest a lot in the economy. We've seen what they did with Volkswagen and Stellantis. So, of course, we would like also to have our share in Quebec. And I think it's important that we get a participation from the federal government in our priorities. And in these priorities, yes, there's healthcare, but there's also the economic development, the green economy, trying to compete also with the RRA program in the United States.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
On va devoir y
Why
aller.
haven't you signed yet for the healthcare money? Why hasn't Quebec?
Simply because it's better to get something than nothing. That's it, but it's not enough.
Merci.
Merci.
En français, pourquoi vous n'avez pas signé encore? Puis pour quand?
Ah, OK, pourquoi on n'a
Les
pas...
transferts en santé.
OK, bien, on ne veut pas avoir de conditions, puis on pense être capable d'arriver à une entente avec le gouvernement fédéral.
Merci.
Ouais.
Merci.
Merci.
How you doing,
Hi,
Premier?
Premier. Hi, Premier. Are you nervous about the Ring of Fire lawsuits?
No, not at all. We want to move forward. We want to work collaboratively with our Indigenous communities, and it's going to benefit everyone, no matter if it's healthcare or if it's making sure they have proper food coming in, not frozen. A lot of flying communities there. And it's going to benefit them with jobs and opportunities and economic growth.
They say there hasn't been enough consultation, though. Are you
We're
worried
in
about that?
non-stop consultation, and we have one of the best ministers of Indigenous Affairs I could ever ask for, Minister Rickford. He's done a great job.
Can you talk about your key priorities heading into the meeting, and as well, what are you going to be calling on the federal government to do when it comes to Bombardier, including with Premier Legault?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in making sure that we manufacture everything we can in Canada or Ontario, and make sure the supply chain comes right across the country. And right now, there's a big footprint with Bombardier right here in Ontario, and we just want to endorse them to have a fair process. If Boeing's better, then Boeing gets it. Bombardier's better, they get it. But it has to be a fair and transparent process. I love things made in Canada.
Other provinces say that you're getting a lot of money for clean tech projects. We just saw Stellantis, and they want their fair share too.
Sure, and I'm all for that. Let's split the pie equally right across the country. Ontario is always one to step up and support other provinces, especially the smaller provinces. Even when we were talking about healthcare, we took a little slice off to make sure the smaller provinces were taken care of. I'll always support the territories and the smaller provinces, but I love things being made in Canada. Not made in the U.S., not made all over the world, but made right here in Canada. We have to take care of our own.
What are your other
the
priorities?
most important thing to come out of this meeting? Is it infrastructure?
I would say infrastructure. In Ontario, we've scheduled about $184 billion of infrastructure, and part of that infrastructure is the Ring of Fire, making sure we get Highway 413 built, Folks, Ontario is the fastest growing region in North America right now. Not Texas, they get about 1,000 people a day, not Florida. Ontario, as you saw, Stats Canada, 504,000 people arrived in Ontario last year. And the reason they arrived in Ontario, because we're economically strong, quality of life. It's the greatest place in the world to live. But thank you.
Specific ask on that? Like,
Well, infrastructure dollars, making sure we work collaboratively with all three levels of government, municipal, provincial, or federal. And you know something, I love Dominic LeBlanc. He's a great guy. Look forward to working with him. We're good pals, and hopefully he can come to the table for the rest of the country.
When it comes to the housing
Thank you guys
crisis,
again
what's
for
the
going.
specific ask on that front, the housing crisis?
Well, housing crisis, we have to cut through all the red tape in municipalities. It's no different than anywhere in Canada. Cut through the red tape, work cooperatively with the municipalities, but it can't take 3 to 5 years to get a permit and get, to get the shovels in the ground. We had 504,000 people show up last year alone. They need a place to live, and we're going to get 1.5 million homes built.
What about this meeting, Premier? What's your top First Nations issue?
Well, infrastructure. But we have the best group of premiers you could ever ask for. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Premier.